What can the life and times of Black Lightning tell us about the DC Universe as a whole? Well, let's hop into the pages of The Other History of the DC Universe, issue number 1 from John Ridley, and find out together, shall we? Alrighty then, so as we join the book, we are reintroduced to one Jefferson Pierce. Even as a young man growing up in Metropolis's infamous suicide slums, he always dreamed of being superhuman. He would spend much of his formative years running away from gangs, from pushers, and from bullies who wanted his lunch money, if only because, well, his family was one of the few who had money to spend on lunch. Jefferson's father was a crusading journalist who sadly would never see his son grow up and go to the Olympics as he was shot dead in the streets one night. Tragedy would continue to dog our hero throughout his life, even though he would go on to win the gold medal. His accomplishment was obscured by the dark cloud that was the 1972 Black September terrorist attack. Jefferson would return home feeling smaller than ever. Right around this time, too, though, the era of the superhero was just beginning, all glorious and colorful, and somehow they were just never there for Jefferson or people like him when they seemed to need them most. Compelled by these feelings, Jefferson hit the road and became a teacher, first of gym, then eventually English literature, then history, and basically whatever else the school needed him to do to help enrich the lives of at-risk youths. Jefferson would change a lot of lives as a teacher, but as we see, he was a hard man, maybe pushing kids a lot harder than they should have been. But the way Jefferson saw it, he had to be hard because real-world America wasn't going to pull any punches on these kids, given where they were from and given the color of their skin. It's around this time, too, Jefferson started exhibiting metahuman powers in his sleep. He would burn up his sheets at night and wake up in the morning not knowing why. Also, while he was awake, he couldn't access these powers, try though he might. Again, this story works a lot with allegory about coming into one's true power and what that means. Eventually, Jefferson was only able to calm these raging powers with the love of a good woman, Lynn. The two got married and eventually moved back to the suicide slums, where Jefferson took a job at Carver High, much like he did during the original 11-issue run of Black Lightning from 1977. The neighborhood had only gotten worse. A criminal syndicate known as the 100 strangled the life from the area, while superheroes like John Stewart the Green Lantern seemed incapable of stopping them. Oh yeah, Jefferson, in a twist that might surprise you, never liked John Stewart. He felt that everything about him came with an asterisk, that he wasn't a real Green Lantern, just a backup, a reservist, don't want to scare white America too much. This is actually a really interesting piece of metatextual reading from John Ridley, because naturally now we all hold up John Stewart as this great important character. A real feather in DC's hat when it comes to diversity. Here's the problem though, if you actually go back and read his first debut stories, they're really uncomfortably racist. While the writers of that era certainly had their hearts in the right place, the trouble was that this was a bunch of nerdy white people trying to write an authentic feeling character for a person that they probably didn't know that well in real life either. The real deciding factor for Jefferson came when John Stewart Green Lantern actually came to give a talk to the kids at Carver High. The only problem was that he never touched the ground. He hovered above them like he was too good to walk on the same ground as them. This would end up being a very important moment in superhero history as the Justice League formed not long after this. Jefferson didn't take any of the same comfort that anyone else did in this idea, the group forming around the same time as the American Bicentennial, and him seeing it as a kind of marketing exercise more than anything else. Furthermore, for a group that was supposed to defend and represent all of America, it sure was predominantly male, predominantly white, and the only colored person there was the Green Martian Manhunter. Now, despite his views on superheroes there and then, Jefferson's world would be rocked when the 100 murdered one of his star students, lynching him inside the school gym. Again, much like the original Black Lightning stories, this was the moment that truly unlocked Jefferson's latent electric powers and sent him down the road of becoming a crime fighter. Family friend and professional tailor Peter Gamby would build Black Lightning his first suit, complete with afro wig meant to throw people off his identity. That was a 100% real thing, everybody, as well as a special belt to regulate his powers. Actually, the belt was what originally gave him powers, but they retconned it later. Gamby would also give Jefferson his famous catchphrase and credo. You probably know it if you're a fan of the TV show or the original comic run. Justice like lightning should ever appear, to some men hope and other men fear. Here's the problem though, it's a misquote and this book actually replaces it with the proper line. Justice like lightning ever should appear, to few men's ruin but to all men fear. Which, given that Jefferson is a smart guy and a teacher, he should be walking around with the proper quote, right? And thus, Black Lightning is officially born and begins cleaning up the streets. He makes great stride, but begins to affect his family life in negative ways. After all, he just can't say he's working on a story or he's a drunk millionaire. When he gets home after a night of crime fighting, he's gotta take care of his kids and still be a teacher in the morning. Harsher still, as Jefferson says, the so-called liberal media that holds up Batman and Superman as superheroes decides to label him as a vigilante, and again, I'm using the comics words here, a ghetto warrior. Eventually, even Superman comes to Black Lightning around this time, maybe making his first trip ever to the suicide slums, only to get a real tongue lashing from Jefferson. Jefferson further has harsh things to say about how the Justice League is dropping the ball, not just in his neighborhood with poverty and drugs, but also on a global scale like the Iran hostage crisis. Jefferson also has kind of an interesting read on Superman, saying that perhaps the reason he drapes himself in so much red, white, and blue is to distract from the fact that he's an alien and that people could very easily turn on him on a dime. And that maybe the reason the last son of Krypton doesn't get involved in any biting political issues is because it's like he's basically trying to run for the Nobel Peace Prize all the time and doesn't want to rock the boat. Another scene too that I'm sure no one was expecting was that Jefferson actually seems to be fond of the messages espoused by Ronald Reagan in his early political career, all the stuff about morality and strength, though he does admit he would later go on to regret all the other horrible stuff. I'm sure too eagle-eyed comic fans like myself will appreciate this Watchmen reference with the blood on the political button. Furthermore, you see what the slogan on the button says? Yeah, that was Reagan's slogan. He came up with that before the new guy ever started saying it. Now, it's at this point in Jefferson's life he's approached by Vixen, aka the hero who was actually supposed to be DC's very first solo black female hero. The only problem is her book never actually made it out due to DC's big 70s implosion. Mari McCabe has come to the famous Black Lightning looking for advice about becoming a hero, and his words to her are admittedly pretty damn cynical. He tries to dissuade her from joining the Justice League because he thinks that she would just end up being another token and never taken seriously. In fact, as we see, the League had tried to recruit Black Lightning himself, but their tactics were questionable to say the least. They couldn't just ask him to be a member, instead they opted to test him with a bunch of fake supervillains. Jefferson refused to join, saying that he didn't want to tick their box or help them dissuade any of their own guilt. And that this whole song and dance routine only further proved to him that they didn't really respect him or the work he was doing in his community. The worst would perhaps still be yet to come for Jefferson, whose wife, Lynn, always knew he was Black Lightning but never wanted to push the issue, instead waiting for him to reveal it to her himself, would divorce him and take their 2 daughters. This on its own was bad enough, but while trying to stop a train assault, another one of Jefferson's students would end up dead, dying in the crossfire of a battle he was having. This combination of events coming so close together sends him into a deep dark depression wherein he gives up being Black Lightning for a time. It's here too Jefferson would reunite with one of his old students that he had pushed too hard, the mother of the student actually sending him to another school. This kid had become a massive success, but Jefferson couldn't actually take credit for all the good the kid had done, and that actively seemed to hurt his feelings. The hits just keep on coming too, as Vixen, we discover, had not only joined the Justice League but become a major hit and was accepted in ways Jefferson never thought possible. It's maybe for all these reasons and more when Batman comes knocking and asking Black Lightning to join his new team, the Outsiders, he opts to actually take him up on the offer this time. After all, the Outsiders were more like him. They had real problems and spoke to real issues in the world, because what better way to fight for social change and social justice than by actively embracing your own otherness. The team was good for Jefferson too, as it helped him fill the family void that was left in his heart. Though he still had some deeply critical reads on superheroes, saying that they're all masochistic gamblers on some level, trying to make up for a past wrong and then keep going even after when they should have stopped. In many ways, Black Lightning's superhero career ends up coming full circle when he gets a chance to change his tune on John Stewart. This was after John Stewart destroyed a planet and tried to take his own life. Jefferson was asked to talk to him, and in a really beautiful scene, Jeff admits that maybe he was too hard on John, that there was a lot of pressure that comes with being the first superhero to look the way he did and come from where he did. And that now, after living so much more of his own life and walking a mile in the shoes of a superhero, Black Lightning understands that Green Lantern wasn't hovering above the rest of them, he was just trying to keep his head above water. Jefferson admits that he couldn't see himself in John before and that he had developed, well, his own prejudice, for lack of a better word, but now he truly sees John for who he is. The Outsiders would sadly end up disbanding not long after this, but Jefferson was confident in the good work they had all done together. The world was definitely a different place than when they started. And new young heroes like Cyborg of the Teen Titans were starting to grow in prominence, basically saying that, Jefferson had to crawl so this new generation could run. And while he admits he doesn't don the Black Lightning costume that much anymore, he does have a new version of it that he carries with him just in case the world should need a hero like him ever again. And so that was the other history of the DC Universe issue number 1, everybody, and oh man, this was a meaty comic with a ton to unpack. This was actually one of the very first Black Label titles they announced, and maybe that's why it feels so vastly different from all the newer ones we've gotten recently. This is a comic that reads like a novel, with art from Camuncoli that expertly harkens back to the time in which Black Lightning first entered the world of comics. This story really is a snapshot of American history and comic book history told through the eyes of one man, and probably the best thing Ridley does here is give us the most three-dimensional version of Jefferson Pierce ever. He's a good man, he's a hero, but he's not a saint. He fails as a husband, he makes the wrong calls, and spends most of his career being really cynical and hard. But it's these character flaws that only serve to make him feel more complex and more human. His anger, his emotions, they're raw, they're unfiltered, and I'm sure for a lot of readers, very, very familiar. I feel too that this is really the type of story that you could only tell in Black Label because it bucks so many comic book trends. There's no villain to fight, no scheme to foil. It's gonna be part of a bigger series, yet also works perfectly fine on its own as a self-contained tale. I must also say it's really impressive to see a hero's entire publication history summed up so expertly in just 40 pages while also making the argument about just how truly important and impactful DC's first solo black superhero was, even if you didn't know it. Overall, I'd feel comfortable giving this one a 10 out of 10. This is one of those real work of art comics, probably the best Black Lightning story maybe told in decades. And honestly, I hope this book sells well and does really good so we can hopefully get more Black Label stories like this in the future that are wildly creative and outside the box and less, well, playing it creatively safe by just doing yet another Batman story.
Hey there everyone, it's your old pal Cave Jewel, and if you're seeing me right now, that means you watched to the end of the video, which I am very appreciative of. It really helps drive engagement and retention and all that other good YouTube stuff. So does liking and commenting. Wink wink. If you like my content too, you should check out my Patreon page. We just redid all the tiers, so there's a ton of great rewards. You can become a patron for as little as $1 a month, and well, it would just really help me out. It's never expected, but always appreciated. So until next time everyone, I've been Cape Joel, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.